Hey everybody, it's Brian Burns. Welcome to this episode of the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast. Hey, today we've got Liz Cain from Openview Ventures. She spent her career at NetSuite and had been building out the inside organization, the business development, SDR organization, and the hundreds of people. So we're going to talk about some of the issues there, about how do you start that? How do you build it out? How do you train people? How do you scale that? Everyone's trying to do this and everyone's struggling. It's hard to do. It's complicated, and it is really sets us up for failure sometimes. So Liz is going to share her experiences and what she's advising her other clients to do and the portfolio companies at Openview. So we're going to get into that interview in just a second. But before we do, I want to make sure you're checking out DialSource. DialSource is the way to connect up your phone system with your CRM system, so you don't have all that duplicate data entry, having it do all the work for you, automate everything for you, and it's all in the cloud. Check it out at dialsource.com. I did an interview a couple of weeks ago with the founder, and it's a game-changing technology for power dialing. And if you have people on the phone, you've got to optimize it because people are just burning out. And this really helps sales reps stay on game, on focus, without having to stuff all that data entry stuff. Let's get into the interview with Liz. Hey, Liz, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Well, thanks for having me on, Brian. All right, to tell you about myself, I guess I'll give you kind of the 30,000 foot view of the career and what got me to where I am today. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's quite a diverse career, and you made a pretty unique shift in the last 2 years.
Yeah, you're definitely right on that. So today I'm a partner at Openview Venture Partners. So we are a VC based in Boston. We invest exclusively in B2B expansion stage software companies. So what that really means is companies that have found product market fit and are starting to scale. So if you look across our portfolio, you'll see a number of horizontal and vertical plays, a bunch of different industries, but they kind of share those common qualities. And my role here is working post-investment and leading the group that goes in and works with our portfolio. I also sit on our investment committee and kind of work in the internal operations of the firm as well. And before this, I worked at NetSuite for about 8 years. I came in through acquisition, actually was working for a smaller company called OpenAir, also in Boston. And at NetSuite, I worked across a whole bunch of different areas of the kind of go-to-market engine, sales operations, account management, selling into the install base, and then ultimately kind of building out the lead gen program and the BDR group there.
So your expertise, you would say, is kind of on that outbound, building that outbound organization?
Yeah, absolutely. At NetSuite, we had a team of people that was doing both inbound lead qualification and outbound prospecting. But I would say kind of the core component of what we did there was figure out how to scale the outbound engine.
And what do you see people doing wrong with that today?
A lot. It's interesting. I think it depends really on the stage of the company, but there's a few kind of common things that I see regardless of stage when somebody spins up an outbound model. Just a few mistakes that tend to happen every single time. And I think the most common one is just really understanding what your top segments are and who you're going to go after. And I always ask this question when we're talking to prospect companies, founders, and heads of sales. On any given Tuesday, when your team walks into the office, who are they going to call? And you'd be like shocked at the array of answers you get. People will say, well, they'll like log into Salesforce, or they'll, they think they've got a list. They'll just respond to any emails that are in their inbox. But like very rarely does somebody answer with like, here is our ideal customer profile. This is how we get the leads. This is how they know who to go after. It's not as structured as that. And I think there's a real missed opportunity there.
I couldn't agree more. And how do you fix that? Do you separate inbound from outbound? Do you?
So I'm a big proponent of separating the two. I think that specialization kind of yields higher results in both. But I think even beyond that, it's figuring out really like what does your ideal customer profile look like? And when we talk about segments with our portfolio, we have this very specific definition. And what we say is it's a group of customers or prospective customers that can be addressed with the same go-to-market strategy and the same product. And so how you create a segment may differ between businesses. So whether that's by industry, by geography, by company size, by some characteristic like high growth, international expansion, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you can actually use the same language when you go talk to them and address their needs with a common product. And so if you can actually start to narrow in on that, then I think you can give your outbound team really good direction.
And my perspective on it is I always see people trying to get into accounts too high, meaning they go straight for the CEO or the CIO or the CRO, and that person doesn't have the problem that you solve, and they don't use the product that you sell, and they are unaccessible. Is that what you're seeing, or?
Yeah, I think you're even taking it one step further, which is like once you find that target segment, who do you actually talk to and with what message within the account? And I think that buyer persona development is really important. Who are your users versus your buyers versus your champions? And I have no problem going in high and actually trying to get that referral down. I think that works really well for many sales. But I do think that the message you use has to change a lot. And most BDRs probably aren't taught that and don't learn it fast enough. And it's exactly what you described, the end user pain point that most BDRs understand because it's what they're taught in their onboarding enablement and like seeing of the product is probably not the same thing that decision maker is thinking about. They're probably thinking more about the ROI and the economic impact than the pain of the day to day. And
I'm sure you must have had a little bit of a cultural change going from, a large, successful organization to kind of the growth stage companies that some may have, a ton of pull, but most of them probably are still in the push mode. People don't know who they are, what they do, right, why they need them.
Right.
What was that like?
Yeah. It's funny. A lot of the things are the same. I'm shocked to say that. And I thought it was going to be more of an abrupt transition than it was. But honestly, yes, there was brand recognition with NetSuite. Don't get me wrong. That definitely opened doors. But I think a lot of the same tactics worked and a lot of the same mistakes were made just because we were a larger company. We had a lot of the same challenges and we had to work through a lot of the same things. And coming early, those same things actually happened to me here. That segmenting problem was something we experienced at NetSuite, and I lived it firsthand before going into work with, smaller expansion and growth stage companies doing the same. And I continue to see it. I think even within a team, you may not all be going after that same segment either. So when you think about specializing your resources even more, you might have somebody targeted at one industry or another. And when you don't, and they have to do the context switching, and they have to think, all right, right now I'm selling to a retailer versus a manufacturer versus a software company, you distract them and they're so much less productive. You're sending out like incoherent messages. You're inefficiently using time. You just don't get as much output. And I think the same thing happens as you kind of do that context switching between buyer personas. You can do it, but you need to get really smart about how you tackle kind of all those different individuals within a company.
And how about as far as channel? What is the right channel today? How is it? How have you seen it change? Over the last 5 years. What
it's changed a lot.
Yeah, hasn't it?
Yeah. It's there's more and more email heavy, and I think there's some great tools out there that have allowed us to be more thoughtful about how we manage like a cadence. So if we think of like the sales lofts and outreaches of the world, there is an opportunity for a BDR to be much more like automated, which should free them up to do way more personalized touches with a subset of accounts. But I think at times what I'm seeing instead is just this sort of like spray and pray methodology where people are just spamming like hundreds and hundreds of contacts at a time rather than giving like really thoughtful interpretation to the list of companies they're going after and using automation to augment the work they would otherwise do. So I think there's a real reliance on email, but calling still works. And in many companies, like I still see that it is the most effective channel and that the conversion rate is higher. There's just a real hesitance to do it at scale now. Are you noticing that as well?
It completely depends on the market. I'm now seeing email. I think email almost peaked last year and is on the way down slope right now. I think we're in the perfect storm this year. In that,
for response rate, you mean?
yeah, well, yeah, because because of the success of the automation tools and the people, the lack of training of personalization versus persistence is a big difference. And I think reps don't understand that no one's sitting around wanting to learn about your product. They've got their own job, their own agenda. So you're obviously interrupting them, and you're trying to get them to think about something. And I think we're skipping this piece of humanity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that I'm trying to work with on a lot of clients, and that is almost so orthogonal to the sales mantra that it's hard for people to think that way.
But it's funny, I think on the flip side, I see people also worrying about being too personalized and it's too big brother, right? I got a message actually. I got a message from a BDR recently who started talking about the fact that I swam in high school. And I was like, where did you find this information? And like, how did you think that would be the way to relate to me right now in my job? That kind of stuff I feel like is happening more and more too, where we're preaching personalization, but the way it's being done is just not really like appropriate or tied to the job or the thing you're selling.
Yeah, and when I say personalization, I mean not only that, but also talking to people like people first.
The human element, yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of like why inbound or content works so well for a short period of time. And I think that kind of peaked as well once everyone did it. And once everyone did it, then everyone had to do it faster, which reduced the quality of it. And now the quality is so low that it's the new spam in some ways.
And now we're coming full circle to direct mail.
A nice little birthday card or congratulations card or something. And those things are working. And I think people are forgetting that you have to start with rapport and not with benefits and ROI.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is a person, and people don't think that way. That facts are a part of the sales process, but not the whole sales process.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the other major things I see when people shift from inbound to outbound or pick up outbound for the first time is they're so used to pitching.
Yeah.
They forget that there's an aspect of education and qualification of the company that needs to occur before you can just kind of slam product in there. And that pitch process happens before the customer has really entered any sort of buying cycle. And I guess I think of the buyer journey as moving through a couple of stages where they first have to become aware of the problem before they can even consider you for it. And if you may be targeting somebody who's a great fit for your product, but if they're not aware of the problem they have in their business or they don't see an opportunity to address something, how can they even start to consider the product you're pitching them? And so you need to create that awareness and that education aspect first.
That's it. Because so much of sales is timing. And you have to build up that awareness, and that is not a pitch. That's a conversation that has to be warmed up. And as soon as you appear as a salesperson pressuring or requesting time, you lose the value, you lose the interest that you really want. How about your feelings about, this big switch that really took place over probably the last 10 years of, reducing the experience level of the people doing this from pretty much 5 years to zero. It was all of a sudden, anybody out of college could be doing this.
You're right. So that's the team I built at NetSuite, right? Our program was actually really founded on the idea that we could, quote unquote, grow an ERP sales rep. So the company was scaling really quickly. We needed to hire tons of enterprise and mid-market account executives, and there just weren't enough, talented, experienced SaaS enterprise salespeople in the world. And so we want to figure out, how do we attract and create more of them? And one of the things we were looking at is, do we hire a more junior profile that's sort of less than 2 years of experience, many people in their first jobs, and try to like create that talent over the period of 12 to 24 months. And it worked really well for us, but the investment that you have to make in training and development and management and enablement is huge. And I think many companies aren't making that. No. And so that's actually something I'm seeing as I'm working with smaller companies now in our portfolio and prospect companies, is many people hire, one or two people. They bring a BDR on, they hand them a phone and say log into LinkedIn and go. And without any sort of training, I think you don't get great results, and I don't think you provide a great customer experience. But I do think that profile can be taught to do it. And I think you can have really talented people if you train them in how to do it. I think the flip side of that, though, with that really junior profile is we're not setting great expectations, and they're itchy after like 6 to 9 months and looking for the promotion and how do I get into the next role. And that turnover can be really tough for actually maintaining consistent lead gen for a company.
What worked for you? I mean, what profile, did you require a college degree? Did certain majors turn out more effective than others? Certain sports interests, or
I wish I had a good answer to that and crack code. We went super broad. So I'll tell you, in my first class of hires, I went to a bunch of the different sales competitions nationally, and I hired some people who had had either sales majors or had been part of sales clubs and competitions. I hired some really strong athletes. I hired people from top liberal arts colleges and from large state schools with great business programs. We were all over the map. There wasn't one profile that exceeded or outperformed the other. It came down to the individual every time. So I guess the quality that across everybody really mattered. I call it horsepower, but I think of it as intelligence plus motivation. If you're selling a complex product and a complex sale, someone who's smart enough to learn what you do and really understand the customer's need. And then the motivation piece, it's intrinsic. You can't teach it. Are you going to be the person that gets told no 100 times and then picks up the phone again?
And how about what interview questions did you have that kind of resonated those issues?
Yeah. It's funny. We broke it down very specifically into a couple of different qualities. We looked at that horsepower that I described. Yeah. We thought about the sales skills and sort of competitive aspect and ability to influence. We thought about cultural fit. And in each of those, we did have a series of questions we identified that were really helpful. But some of my favorites were really looking at the patterns of behavior and understanding how they made decisions. So why did you go to the school you went to? Why are you looking at the jobs that you are? How are you going to make the decision on which job to take? Let's say you had 3 offers on the table, and really seeing how they think and how they process information was really helpful. Yeah. And then I think some of the things on the kind of competition or I don't want to say dealing with hardship. It's the wrong word, but
adversity or
overcome. Yeah, adversity. That's exactly it. And just having them walk through some difficult situations. I would ask people, have you ever worked in the service industry? Have you waited tables? Yeah. Have you ever had a difficult interaction with a customer? How did you resolve it? And hearing how they handled those kind of situations was also really telling, because those are things you deal with every day in sales.
How about coachability? That seemed to be a really hot topic for the last several years with sales leaders. Was that something that you looked for or tested for?
Yeah, that's a great one, actually. So what we used to do is we would do a sales role play on the phone in one of our first or second interviews. And somebody would do a setup. They would, do a 5 to 10 minute role play with somebody. And then at the end of it, they would give 1 or 2 pieces of feedback. And they would say, here's one thing you could do better, or here are 2 things I noticed. And then when we brought that person on site, we would do it again and see if they actually took that feedback.
Yeah. And
Coachability really did matter. You're right. It was
Yeah.
a good indicator if somebody could ramp up quickly.
And let's talk about that ramping, because what I hear from a lot of reps is that they get like 2 weeks of, product training,
Yeah.
CRM training, and a little bit of sales training, and then go to it.
Yep.
How long did it take you guys to get somebody from, the day they walked in to the day that they kind of were in the groove?
Yeah, I mean, it evolved so much over the years, and our process and our onboarding and the number of people involved changed. But I'll say this, I think we did a great job of splitting time between product training with a sales focus. And what I mean by that is it wasn't like the nitty gritty, like behind the scenes, how does this work? But it was about how does your customer benefit from using this? Who are the customers that are using it, and how do you position it? But like pretty deep in like the parts of our product so that you could kind of align the needs to them. Then we did a lot of work around sales skills, so true prospecting training. And that was, from how to identify the right accounts to how to source the individual contacts and contact information to how do you open a first call, to craft emails, to research, to objection handling. And we would spend a lot of time on that. And then the final piece is exactly what you described around like kind of systems and tools and process and trying to teach really strong time management from the get-go and build the right habits.
Yeah.
We had people on the phones within 3 weeks. They were spending time, in like leads and accounts, and we tried wherever possible to kind of give them some like kind of low quality leads, right? We would take sort of lowest inbound stuff, low risk, and say like, have at it, get some at bats, like start to feel comfortable. And then we would start to progress them onto higher quality leads into running like an outbound section. We had people live in 3 weeks. I would say like, full productivity probably took more like 2 to 3 months. And what I see now is there's a lot of shadowing that happens in onboarding, and too much of that is passive time. And so I think onboarding in this concept of like shadowing is great if you're actually making sure that they're processing and learning the information. But so often when someone's shadowing, they literally just like sit there and screw around on their email
Right.
instead of actually like understanding what's happening, asking questions and engaging in the learning. So I think if you can create ways to make sure your new people are learning from your best, and that you're actually ensuring and holding them accountable for actually learning it, I think that can be a great way to ramp up for a small company, right? It doesn't all have to be this classroom style training or, overkill in developing content. You can learn from just the best people who are already doing the job.
Yeah. Listen to their calls. If they're recorded. I don't think the shadowing thing, that gets old after about an hour. Right? It's like, okay, this is pretty boring. And
but if you're talking about it and you're engaging, and when you get off the call, somebody says, okay, like, do you understand why I did it this way? What did you hear that I didn't? And you can get them really talking about it. I think that could be really interesting.
Yeah, kind of a case study model. That's really helpful.
Yeah, exactly.
Now with your portfolio companies, I'm sure they're all vetting for your time because, everybody knows that a VP of sales life expectancy is not exactly
pretty short.
Not too many people remember Vietnam, but it was about the same tour of duty. So I'm sure they're looking for as much help as they can get. How's that like?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I love the way we've set up our model. So because we have all these companies that are sort of at the same stage of growth, what we found is they're encountering a lot of the same challenges. And you're right, it comes down to really two things. One is, how do I get more of the right customers? And the second piece is, how do I find more of the right talent? And we have a pretty large team internally that's dedicated to doing those two things. Everybody kind of comes out of either another software company or a consulting background, and can dive in like one particular area. And so what we try to do is just go really deep with our companies for the first couple of years post-investment and lend a helping hand where they need it. So sometimes that's on the marketing front. Sometimes it's in deploying technology. Sometimes it's in packaging and pricing, or building out a BDR team. And we're pretty flexible about that. But we try to kind of fill the gaps for them and give them some extra leverage for their team. As far as how you prioritize, always tough, but basically we run a backlog of projects and we try to figure out both, where the greatest need is and where we can have the most impact. and we're just constantly reprioritizing.
Yeah, and I spent my career on the vendor side, and every time that we got that B round, they'd hired the 10 salespeople, and I was typically one of them, but they hired them all at once. Because they got the money all at once.
Yep.
And,
and everybody's ramping up.
Everybody's ramping up. And it was just, herding cats, and just nobody knew what they were doing. Everybody was, vetting for all the same resources. Nobody knew, is this a real deal or is it not a real deal? How do you help people through that process?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really tough. I'm kind of laughing here because I'm like, that's like probably 3 companies I'm working with this week. All right. So I guess from the get-go, one is making sure we actually do have leadership in place is probably the biggest place we can have impact. So when, somebody takes on a new round of funding, there's often some leadership gaps that need to be filled in and, kind of waiting to get that funding in order to do it. So you're right. Like when you say we went and hired 8 reps, we also probably need to hire a VP of sales or a head of marketing and kind of fill in some gaps. So that's one, spending time helping them find the right people. And then second, I think it's a little bit of what we touched on here already is, can we do some of the deep dives into the data and share back those learnings? Can we do interviews with customers or lost prospects and again, play back some of those insights and make recommendations on how to change? So whether that's identifying top segments or product gaps or showing that, the way that a competitor is demonstrating the product is actually more compelling than how you're doing it, calling out process improvements. It's kind of just iterating and making small recommendations along the way and trying to figure out which of those projects is going to have the most impact, just constantly experimenting and trying new things. And we're partnering with the leadership team and the, organization already in place and figuring out kind of what they need from us versus what they can do themselves. And again, how we just add that like extra helping hand.
And how about as far as advising them on, when do you put a sales ops and a sales enablement person in place?
Yeah, it's funny. That's I think something I've been talking about more, but I'm seeing it actually happening earlier and earlier, where people are thinking about how to get like the right operational support, and it's part enablement, part like the technical operations, part metrics and reporting, tool systems, process, productivity, but I see that coming in earlier and earlier, and I think it's huge for actually getting more out of the team you have in place. I don't know if you've seen that earlier. And
I see people doing it too late.
Definitely.
Yeah. And
but I'm starting to see the tide shift on that.
Well, especially on the operations side, because what you end up having is 10 or 20 reps wasting their time trying to get this thing to work with this thing, and it's not syncing up. The forecast isn't populating. The VP of sales is yelling at everybody, and all this time is wasted on the operations function. And, I certainly experienced when I was a rep, it was like, could you please get an operations person to do the forecast the way you want to see it? Yep. I'd be at the airport. He goes,
time saver.
Yeah, open up your laptop. Yeah, your deals aren't coming through. You're like, oh my God, I'd kill you. Those types of things. Hey, this has been a great conversation. Where can people go to learn about your work and what you're up to?
Yeah, openviewpartners.com. We post all of our content there on our lab site. There's a blog link right there. And can always reach out on LinkedIn or Twitter, and just kind of happy to field questions and see where we can help.
Hey, it's always great to talk to somebody who's actually done it and now continues to help other people do it. When you're building out that sales organization, it all depends quite a bit on how much is inbound and how much is outbound. Do you have the right data? Do you have the accounts identified? Do you know what they care about? And I've been working with companies now on this, and what I'm finding is the better pitch isn't working anymore. The phone coming up with a nice thing to say isn't working anymore, no matter how compelling your offering is, unless you find that needle in the haystack, that person who's looking for it right then and now. it's not going to succeed. That's why I started this course, start the conversation, get the meeting, and as well as the sales development grad school, which goes live May 1st. So if you have a team that you want to get trained up and have a mentor outside of yourself and your team and see what the best practices are that are working out there today, because I'm talking to about 10 different managers a week on exactly what is working and what isn't. And I'll tell you right now, what's not working is what everyone's doing, is that pounding the phones and pounding the emails, trying to come up with the magic words that are going to get people to talk to you. And it's just asking for 10 seconds and pitching them on you. They don't care anymore. They just don't not care. Why? Because you all sound the same. And when everyone does it, it works for nobody. So you can keep doing it. And if it's working for you, just keep doing it. Don't go changing to try and please me, as Billy Joel would say. What you have to do is use science and understand how to connect with people, start a conversation, talk about them, build interest, and then convert them to you. And I have a system that I've used for the last 5 years with me and my clients, because I faced this. When I was an entrepreneur 5 years ago, and cold calling worked, then it slowly stopped working almost completely, meaning that, I would get maybe one decent conversation a day. And pounding the phones. And then email would work, and then it didn't work. Then social. I crushed it on social for like 2 or 3 years. And then all of a sudden, social isn't working anymore. And now what I found is a new system that I take a step back, I slow down, I understand that their situation is cold. They don't know me. If they don't know me, they don't like me. If they don't like me, they can't trust me. And whatever I say has no meaning because I haven't built that rapport. I show you how to do that with cold people, and you start conversations, and it is getting phenomenal results. Check out the B2B or the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast interview where I do an interview with Ron Massey from Teradata. He shares exactly, he went from being an SDR to an outside enterprise sales rep, and he's crushing it now, getting into new accounts at the VP level, working both the business and the technical side. Young guy, he's really figured it out, and he's embraced the class, and he actually does it. And that's the difference. The people who do it get the results. The people who poo-poo it, that they stick with the pitch or they wait for leads. And waiting for leads isn't a good strategy. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Make sure you're checking out Dial Source. They're doing a fantastic job about connecting up the phone with the CRM. Unbelievable. And also connect up with me on LinkedIn. I've got lots of great stuff there. And the B2B revenue.com website. That's where you can schedule a call with me if you'd like. Under the training tab, training page, just you can check out the courses and set up a 15-minute discussion, see if it's a match for you. No pressure. I only want you to sign up if it's right for you. I don't want to deal with people who it's not a match for. So completely 100% sincere with that. And we'll see you next time.